afternoon, everyone. Welcome to this very interesting fireside chat on fostering a culture of innovation. This is the second episode of Smart HR Dispersed Yet Connected series we are doing in partnership with Right Management. Today, it's more important than ever for leaders to create and promulgate a culture which allows everyone to bring their whole selves to work every day and feel psychologically safe in their roles. How has the pandemic and remote working impacted this? What is expected of the organization and its leaders, and what kind of innovation culture is required? To answer these questions and more, we have two eminent leaders from the industry with us. With great delight, I introduce them to you. Leena Saijwani, VP Group Human Resources, Tata Group. Leena is a seasoned HR leader with a successful track record in strategic HR leadership positions, managing global portfolios. She has demonstrated steel leadership in setting up and managing international teams, thriving in a complex matrix structure, operating in global organizations, consulting skills and businesses acumen, managing business cycles over 20 plus years of experience within various industries and HR functional areas. Welcome, Leena. Alongside Leena, we have another distinguished leader, Prashant Pandey. Prashant is the country manager for Right Management India, the global leader in talent and career management workforce solutions within the Manpower Group. Prashant has a rich and extensive experience of around 2 decades in human resource consulting. Throughout his career, he's been a trusted advisor for leading corporates, family businesses in India and abroad. He has spearheaded the design and implementation of large-scale talent management and global transformation projects in multiple countries across the globe. Welcome, Prashant. I would now like to welcome the audience too. Thank you for being here. You can use the chat tab on your screen to ask a question. The speakers will be more than happy to take all your questions. Thank you, Leena and Prashant, for sharing your knowledge on this critical topic. Starting this discussion with you first, Leena, the question is, all organizations, irrespective of size and industry, perseveres to be highly adaptive and agile. According to you, what are the key elements that help an organization develop more connected teams, people-centric approach, and an agile decision-making cycle?
So, first of all, it's my privilege to be here, Pooja, and I would like to welcome the audience as well. Uh, I'll try and do justice to the very difficult question you have asked me. Uh, there is absolute clarity, I think, around the world that agility is a very key aspect of leadership going forward. How companies adapted to the change that all of us were forced to embrace is something which provides a testimony to the fact that agility is going to be a key aspect going forward. Unfortunately, what we desire of our business doesn't get replicated in the processes and the practices we have within. And I think we were all forced to change some of the processes and the practices unknowingly when the pandemic hit us last year. And I would say that a connect and because we had to respond, and what we call as rapid response teams came together, figured out a solution, and I think 1 or 2 months it took teams to struggle a bit, figure out how to move forward, and I think it kind of started working on things started coming into place. Now, how do you replicate this when you don't have a crisis? How do you replicate this when you're looking at an ongoing situation is the key that will drive future, right? So it's very important to understand in a situation like this what is the purpose and the mission. And some of this has to really focus a lot. An agile team, a team which is self-directed, or a team which is not managed, has to be driven by a strong sense of purpose and everyone aligning to that. So that's one thing which I think is going to be very key. communication becomes a very critical aspect. I think what worked well, and some of our businesses also reported that during this time they found a rhythm of having a daily stand up meeting. They found a rhythm of having, at least if not daily, once or twice in a week, stand up meetings where everybody came together and figured out what they need to do and delivered through that week. I think that is a best practice that should continue going forward, and that helps you also figure and connect the dots across all teams. So you could easily say that, hey, I know we spoke about this last week, and it wasn't it wasn't something that we were supposed to work on this week. Can we shift gears because this has become more critical? I think those dialogues started happening a lot more, leading to faster decision making and more agile responses. Technology has to enable this, and if we had to reimagine this, I think we'll have to reimagine all our practices and processes internally for it to become a habit. Lastly, I would say that the culture, you know I would say, last year we were forced to adapt, and last year we were forced to behave in a certain manner. When you remove some of these external forces, how do you sustain this within your organization? How do you sustain the change orientation within the organization is going to be very key. So the cultural aspect of being agile and then replicating that through the processes and the practices is going to be key going forward.
Thank you, Leena. Very interesting. Prashant, what kind of signals are you getting from the industry?
Sure. So just picking on the point that Leena mentioned, the things that you were forced to do during the time of crisis, which was during the lockdown, during the pandemic, how do you still do it, in normal times? And I think this is one thing that organizations are learning. That so while and this is a phrase that I use often. So while we are doing our best to win the war, and the war against pandemic, it will be equally important in terms of how do we set up and get ready to win the peace, right? So that's going to be extremely important. Now, in terms of what I'm seeing happen, and forced, and there are certain behaviors that I'm seeing, happen in the industry right now. Number one, what I'm very clearly seeing is, and this is my interaction with a lot of leadership teams over the years. There was always this, at times, and specifically in certain industries, there was this little hangover that my industry is very unique. We operate very differently. This often saying that हमारे industry में तो ऐसे ही होता है. So that is now being challenged. So one of the things that I'm seeing, from an agility point of view, so this openness to learn from other industries is sort of entrusted, and people are now more open to to widen their horizon, seek inputs from completely unexpected sources, because this is reality. People have realized that your success model, you can actually borrow from some very unexpected sources from a completely unrelated industry. So a pharmaceutical industry, for example, learning from hospitality, now that's something that is beginning to happen more and more. The other thing that I'm seeing is that this whole focus, because again there has been enough conversation around how the whole digital transformation journey has been accelerated because of the pandemic. So people were in the different maturity curves in their digital transformation journey, and a lot of organizations understood the importance of it. But this whole last one year sort of accelerated that entire process. So one of the things that I more and more, when we do looking at competencies, frameworks for organization, doing assessments work for organization, this whole awareness around digital literacy at leadership levels, that has sort of taken a completely different form and shape and urgency. And when I'm using the word digital literacy, it is not about the technical aspect, but appreciation, for example, various phrases, various concepts, various technology, various things that machine learning, AI, data analytics, all that, appreciation of what it really means and how does it get implemented in my business model, and where can I derive benefit in terms of becoming more competitive, becoming more savvy when I interact with the customer. I think that is happening more and more. And I think when you look at all these things, these collective change in behavior, my sense is organizations, it's a cause and an effect. It's leading to organizations becoming slightly more open, slightly more agile, slightly more adaptive to the change.
Thank you, Prashant, for that. So we all agree that the crisis put the focus on agile leadership as a key to overcome setbacks. My next question is for you, Prashant. What has been some of your learnings based on your interaction with senior leaders of different organizations? And what would your consulting strategy be, not now, but let's say in the next 2 to 3 years? We'll think a little long term.
Sure. So coming to your first part of your question, I mean, when interacting with leaders, few things, and this is a common question that I ask in terms of, what will define success for you? What sort of people do you need, within your organizations if you need to succeed in this fast evolving scenario where probably your entire existing business model is going through a transformation? And if I sort of drill down everything that I've heard, there are 2, 3, maybe 4 things that there's a common thread along the line. So leaders constantly, one of the things that I constantly hear is, and if I sort of thematize it, I'll use the phrase brightness, right? And they want that. And brightness, don't confuse, one thing that I keep telling people, don't confuse brightness with how intellectual you are, but how intellectually curious you are. And there's a difference between the two. Your how hungry are you to learn new things? What's your appetite to learn, right? So that's what brightness is, your ability to connect dots. How quickly are you able to comprehend the meaning of events and what does it mean to your business? So that's one thing that I would speak about. Second, and the other thing around brightness, very clearly what people are saying, it has nothing to do with your academics, it has nothing to do with your degrees, and it's purely your understanding of what's happening out in the geopolitical system and your ability to interpret it in your organizational context. That's what brightness, most leaders have defined it as. Second, from again, if I thematize it, the phrase that will come to my mind is drive. Drive is getting unhooked from your past success and your hunger, your energy. Once you identify a certain strategic driver, strategic initiative, how passionately do you chase it down? That's drive. And then comes the third part, which is, the other part of it leads into is it's your endurance. Because trust me, today, how fast things are, you will probably, what you decide to do initially may not necessarily give you the expected success. Then how resilient you are. What's the tenaciousness that you demand, the amount of stamina that you display, that is extremely important. And one thing, when it comes to, when you need to display endurance, it's all about your adaptability. How quickly are you able to, shift gears, your comfort with ambiguity. Then often used phrases is VUCA. It's a, and how do you deal with that? That becomes extremely important. And this is something that I hear constantly leaders speak about. And, so that's part one of your question. Part two, in terms of, coming closer to home in terms of what we do, which is the consulting work. How are we going to approach this? I think it's going to be completely dependent in terms of what is the flexibility, what is that the industry puts up as demand, right? Clearly, what I see is from a long-term perspective, both the hard part, which is the org structure, design, all that will need to be looked at. And then there would be the softer part of the work that we do, which is how clearly the vision has been articulated, how emotionally connected the larger organization is with the vision, the culture aspect. All of that will need to be looked in. How much we'll do what will obviously will be dependent on individual organizations.
Thank you, Prashant. So, Leena, the same question to you is based on your this 1 year of learning, which I'm sure has been of a great magnitude. Uh, how does it prepare you to become a leader, and where do you see yourself not next 6 months, but next 2 to 3 years? How do you think the leadership will change?
So, just building on to what Prashant said, I think couple of things I would add, Pooja, which
Mhm.
are important and which I saw coming into play a lot in the last 1 year is empathy. It was because everybody was in a similar situation and they were dealing with the same kind of stress, the same kind of challenges. It kind of equalized every human being at some level. There was a higher degree of empathy and therefore a higher degree of connectedness that came forward last year. I would say, we keep talking about work-life balance. Keep talking about work-life integration. Last year, it truly got integrated in a manner that you reached people's homes. You were pretty much seeing that for the most of the year, and there was a bit of connectedness, which I think is a good thing that happened last year. It happened by design, the way it was, the way we had to deal with. But I think this design element could be something that a leader should keep in mind going forward, because it did connect that individual to the leader. Second, I would say is, I did see people who were authentic, who were, expressing themselves without putting on a show of, bravity, actually connect better. And the being authentic therefore is going to be, and we have spoken about it. I think this has been a theme for the last 2 3 years, but I think it came into foray last year a lot. So I would add to the list that Prashant said, which I totally agree with, and I'll say these two will be added to that list. Now, the second element is more for us to think about the way roles and jobs are described. I was about to hire somebody in my team, and then when this happened and we were all working from home, it forced me to think about the way I was looking at that job. It was a job. It was a full-time thing, that or a part-time thing for a person to come into and sit in front of me and deliver. I said, you know what? What if I just break this into 3 4 elements? I maybe can give this to 4 people, and maybe I get the best in class in that particular skill. So I think going forward, talent will be available anywhere and everywhere, and the leader has to be open to think about talent that way, which is not talent as a role, not talent as a job, but talent as a micro task. And I should be open enough to get that micro task integrated into my work. And I think that will be a very defining trend that may emerge in the next 2 3 years. So that would be my take.
Thank you, Lena. Very interesting. And picking up from there, when we talk about that we need to drive innovation and creativity, we need to give full freedom to the employees, as well as Prashant mentioned that, we need adaptive workforce who are quick to change. So what are the changes that we need to make in the current organization structure? How can we, make give away hierarchies and make it more lean organization, or stop micromanagement? How do these changes start, and how, and that is one way in which we can make the workforce creative and innovative. What are the other ways in which you think you can foster a culture of innovation and creativity in your organization?
It's easier said than done, and I'm yet to come across a company which has done it well. because at the heart of it remains the culture of the organization. uh, at the end of the day, all of us say that outcomes matter, efforts don't, and most of our systems are designed to look at outcomes and not the efforts. At times, for giving that space for people to innovate, efforts have to also be looked at, and this is not a general statement, because you have to call out that, I'm experimenting, it's a big risk that I'm taking here, and I'm okay if we fail here. I think it can't be generally applied that all efforts will be counted and we will not look at outcomes. You have to specify that I'm taking a big risk here, and I want to take, a big risk, and it's okay if we fail, and make that known to the team. People give their best when they have the autonomy and the freedom of choice to learn how they want to deliver how they want to, and to create how they want to. Now, how do you enable that in your system? You have to critically evaluate your entire ecosystem for this. Because, if you're saying let people learn how they want to, is your learning system helping you do that? When you say people create how they want to, how are the jobs being assigned to them? Are they being assigned to them, or are they being, on their own, coming forward, taking initiative, saying, I'm going to work on this, right? And work how they want to, which is what has happened last year, right? Flexibility of work. And it may not be possible to do that in all entities. For example, if I look at our own group, is flexibility a choice that can happen on a shop floor? No. Is flexibility a choice that I can give to somebody who's working in a retail store? No. So, I think some of that needs to be also catered to, and the the way work would happen in these entities may be different, but the principles that I talked about remain there. So flexibility is, I think, more like a knowledge worker, and that gets spoken the most because I think the knowledge companies are also the loudest on media like this. So we sometimes get swayed with the flexibility and work from home concepts from there, but one needs to bear in mind that there are people feet on street, there are people who are in the stores, there are people who are in the manufacturing locations, who also need to be brought into this whole concept of innovation that we are talking about. So for them, what does flexibility mean needs to be a little bit different and carefully defined as well. So that would be my response to a very, very wide question that you fielded to us.
Thank you, Leena.
So let me also sort of
Yeah.
and to Leena's point when she mentioned, and it's absolutely a, a fact, and it's so the point that she made, that she has not seen many organizations, innovation is a nice term, having a culture of innovation is nice term. It's absolutely essential. We all understand that it's a utopian state that an organization would want to achieve. But to the point that she made, how many organizations are actually able to do it on ground? I mean, it's something that the discussion can go on and on. But sum and substances, it's as he rightly said, easier said than done. It's not easy to do it. And I, and just to make this point in terms of employees, how do they feel? So I referred to the survey that we are running right now. In our last conversation, Pooja, you would remember, and just to draw certain insights from there. And this is a survey for people who are listening to this for the first time. So this is a survey that is still opening. This is still open, where we are asking people to respond to a certain set of questions on two parameters: what they believe is important for the organization, and the second parameter is how good, how do they rate the current organization on the same parameter. You may believe something is extremely important, but you may believe that we are not good at it. And some of the insights, and as I said, the survey is still open, but just to draw certain insights from them as much as data has come in. So almost 80% of the respondents to that survey said that openness to innovation and new ways of working is important for the business. But less than half believe that currently they can do the same in their organization, right? Most of the respondents believe that it is essential for their organizations to encourage employees to challenge the norm. One third of the same respondents, however, believe that they can do that in their own organizations. 79% of the respondents, believe that valuing different viewpoints, inclusive decision making is important. But only 1/4 of them believe their organization provides them with an environment to do that. And this is only to sort of build and put some form and shape to what Lena mentions, that intent is there, understanding and appreciation of the importance is there, but whether the rubber meets the road is a big question to ask. Now, coming back to the original question that you asked, Pooja, in terms of the whole thing around culture of innovation. One of the things that I realize, and I keep saying this to a lot of organizations, that we look at culture, and for me, culture is the end objective, right? Is a what will lead to that culture, the cause and effect. Culture, yes, it's a cause to a lot of things, but you need to look at culture as an effect of a lot of things, and that's the way we would need to look at it. And also feeling, again, what Lena mentioned, how safe you feel around doing innovation, and this whole thing, it's feeling, it's a state of mind. It's like being in love. So you're feeling psychologically safe to do innovation. It's a state of mind. What we need to then ask as an organization is, what is it that will cause people to be in that state of mind where they feel safe to voice their opinion, to innovate, right? And the other thing that again we need to remember is that this whole concept of feeling safe to innovate, it's very infectious. It spreads very fast, right? And we need to be very conscious. And so if there is anywhere in the organization that we can create that safe environment, the likelihood that it will replicate itself in the larger organization is that much more higher. Now, then as an organization, then the questions that we need to ask is, how do we behave? Very pointed questions, right? How do we behave when there's pressure on margins? How do we respond to mistakes? Are we still as tolerant as we would like to be, or our tolerance level is reduced? Question that we need to ask is, how open are we to test our limits? Or does our brain push us to the tried and tested? Right? A lot of organizations would like to believe that the intelligence is lying at the top of the hierarchy in the organization, something that can easily be questioned. But one thing is very sure, that the insights are lying throughout the organization. Now, if you're talking about innovation, one thing that we need to really think through in terms of, what is the speed, what is the velocity with which the insights are reaching the intelligence, right? And how does the organization deal with that insight? That is something that we need to ask very closely to ourselves as an organization. Because what is happening within an organization, I think the larger organization is observing very closely, right? And they respond very unconsciously. So the point is, as a leadership team, how do we respond to these questions? And if you do a very dispassionate analysis of our behaviors, I think a lot of questions will that get answered in terms of, while we believe that we want a very innovative organization, why is it actually not happening on the ground? And I think that's where probably this sort of a dispassionate analysis about leadership behavior, how do we operate, I think there'll be a lot of answers for us to find.
And Pooja, I'll add to what Prashant is saying. The hierarchy bit that I didn't answer that. The hierarchy bit is very real. And if you try and break it, you also exclude the very crucial middle layer, because they start feeling insecure. They start wondering what their role will be if you drive towards leaner organization. And in some, it has to be very carefully thought through, is the point that I'm trying to make. You need to find a way to engage everybody in the chain if you want to make a flatter, leaner organization in spirit. Now, uh, the middle layer, uh, what we call manager, I was jokingly telling somebody today that word itself is so archaic, right? Manager means what? You have to manage. Uh, you know, you can't manage innovation, can you? Right? You can't manage some of these things that I talked about or Prashant talked about. So
Mm.
that itself needs to be recalibrated, rethought. And if we put that person in charge of enabling his or her talent, enabling and taking, and the role becomes more of I will help you where you need me to, I will guide you, coach you where I need you to, uh, and I'm only there to remove obstacles from your way. And that role then redefines itself from a more like enabler than a manager, right? I don't know what is the right term for that role, but I think a crux of the issue in most of over management, I recently posted also on this, crux of the issue is over management in our hierarchy.
Mm.
And we can talk about lean as a concept, but till the time we redefine these roles,
Yeah,
I don't think we'll get to a lean structure at all.
yeah.
Very
We'll keep
interesting.
calling it lean, just we'll keep calling it lean because it looks lean, but
Mm.
it won't feel lean for people to experience.
And I think, Lena, I think the problem, the way we have ended up with so many layers in an organization hierarchy, I think we have completely detached ourselves from a job content. What we are trying to address are people's aspirations,
Very true.
right? So you create
Very true.
layers to meet aspirations. अच्छा ठीक है, manager अभी क्या करना है, उसको senior manager बना दिया, right?
It's called, Prashant, it's called cyclic income.
Yeah, yeah,
जब आप ये
yeah,
साइकिक इनकम है,
yeah,
एडिशनल इनकम विच इज
yeah,
साइकिक.
yeah. And I
Very.
think I think there's no point in critiquing it. I think that's the way it has been. No point in critiquing it. It's only that now we need to get slightly more intelligent and slightly more adventurous in terms of addressing these things, and just question whether this will continue to work, or there's a better way of doing it. I mean, it's just about that.
I think enabler is a great word to replace it with manager. It'll be great, if this picks up.
Run a quiz, Pooja. Run a quiz.
Okay, yeah, we could do a small survey kind of a thing. So, Prashant, picking up from this, are there some new breed organizations which are more which are more quick and agile, and they don't have this problem of a large middle layer, and they are more futuristic, and are they the kind of future businesses that will do well based on your interaction with different industries and different companies?
Yes, there are organizations who are slightly better, but can we club them industry wise? Because every industry would have sparks of success. I mean, and where you would not address, expect agility. I have seen enough agility, and again, just boring up. And for you, it will be repetitive, but something that has stayed with me. Public sector organizations, you would not expect them to, but my personal experience, the amount of work that we are doing currently in that particular space, some of the Navratna companies, ONGC, BPCL, IOCL, NTPC, public sector banks, Bank of Baroda, Bank of India, I am seeing them for whatever reasons. I mean, we can, but, and probably it is also because, it's the theory of relativity. When you don't expect and something happens, it wows you that much more. Probably that's my reality. But whatever but some of the openness and agility that I've seen in them towards responding, towards adapting newer ways of working, it has surprised me. For example, I at some point of time, I've given this example enough about NTPC. I mean, they had signed up us pandemic for running assessments in a in-person format. pandemic hit, the project obviously went into a bit of a freeze mode. And when things started to open up, we suggested them, obviously, there was still apprehension about getting everybody 15, 20 people into a common place. And then we suggested them try out an online platform, assessment platform, introduce them to a platform. And the openness with which they decided to migrate, they obviously they had their own apprehensions. We had to sell it internally to a few people. All those change management things had to be managed. But the point is, I'm trying to make is, they were willing to experiment with it. They were willing to take the risk, and they actually today they have very successfully transformed into that entire platform. So it's been amazing. It's been a great, because that's where you would not expect, right? So, and this is again, if I, if to your point in terms of, are there any specific sectors? It's not, because the banking, they are the financial services, energy, and I've seen it cutting across sectors. So to your point, yes, and I would not want to look at one particular sector. You would assume technology, IT, ITS companies being that much more agile. But I have again had a mixed experience. There are certain organizations who have been very rigid in terms of, and to Leena's point, in terms of communication, there's been a lot of redundancies, and that's a large part of the work that we did during the pandemic. I think some of the technology companies that whom we would expect them to be slightly more empathetic towards how they manage that entire process, sort of disappointed us. I mean, in terms of, the way they responded to the whole process, but there are some companies within the same sector extremely empathetic in terms of the way this entire process, the way the communication needs to happen. So yeah, there are bright sparks, and across industries is what I would say.
Thank you, Prashant. So going back to psychological safety, Leena, my question is, what are the kind of employee experiences you've been creating in your organization with respect to employees' physical and emotional well-being, which has really gathered steam, because of the pandemic, but now it's become a norm. That creating great experiences for employees is the only way you can help them, nurture them, and make them more outcome oriented, productive, as well as thriving.
I think one good thing again that happened during the last year is a little bit more openness about managing stress. I think it became a lot more real, and it was okay to talk about anxiety. It was okay to talk about stress. And I think, if you see a large workforce, uh, it is bound to happen that you will have situations like this. It just became easier to accept by most of the people, including people who may have gone through it, to come out and say that, hey, I need help in this area, help me out. So thankfully, Pooja, we had at a group level done a bit of thinking about this even ahead of the pandemic. What we did see was higher adoption of some of these practices across our group. So if about 17, 18 companies had a certain solution, that number just shot up significantly during the last 1 year, providing access to people to tools around wellness, emotional well-being as well. We had introduced something called Learning Latitude through Tata Tomorrow University last year, and we repeatedly emphasized on this particular aspect. We also spoke about uh, issues around parenting or elderly care, which perhaps would not have been spoken about in any other time, because people were locked in the house with challenges of managing kids, challenges of managing elders as well. So I think I'm hoping again that some of these continue, because these are real problems. They just became pronounced because everybody was experiencing it. But I'm hoping that some of these things continue, and we are in the we are actually trying to create a broader framework around well-being. In fact, TCS recently had done a yoga certification which saw tremendous response within TCS, and we are looking to expand that across the Tata Group, where I learn how to teach yoga, for example, not just do yoga. And people like me would like to learn, not because I want to teach, but because I want to do myself well. So I think some of those aspects have become more critical, and we are trying to see at a group level how do we create interest groups which will cut across all our group companies, and help people choose what they want to. It will, at the end of the day, it will still remain an individual choice. Not if, my idea of well-being is very different from Prashant's and very different from Pooja's, right? So I may think nutrition is well-being. Somebody else may think that fitness is well-being. Somebody else is into meditation as well-being, and you have to create a holistic program which appeals to most of the organization, and those who are not at all bothered about well-being, at least pull them a bit towards well-being in future. So I think that will be our approach, and we are it's work in progress, because we have a very wide organization. Each company, of course, are doing what they think is appropriate for their audience. So I know some of them ran Zumba classes through this whole time, etc., etc. So there were multitude of these mindfulness programs, mindfulness workshops happened across. So all of that did happen, and that will continue to happen. At the same time, a holistic approach which appeals to uh, most of the requirements across is going to be key for future, and that's what we'll be working on.
Thank you, Leena. So today there was an article in the Times of India newspaper that people who practice yoga during the lockdown had far lesser stress than the ones who did not practice yoga. So
I was one of them.
yeah, even
Yeah.
I'm also very yoga
Yeah.
person. Um, so Prashant, what are the kind of undercurrents you are seeing in the industry with respect to emotional and physical well-being and overall psychological safety of employees?
So very clearly, the conversation is now much more in the open. Again, Leena mentioned about it. So very clearly, I think for us as a consulting organization, I think the amount of inquiries, the requirements that we have done, can you organize a yoga teacher? Again, everything that we have been used to dealing with inquiries around talent management, right? And suddenly the amount of queries our existing clients coming us and asking us has really gone up significantly. So the point is, I mean, just going by that statistics in isolation, in fact, a few inquiries now that I'm thinking more about it in terms of setting up counseling cells, outsourcing that entire piece to us. Those conversations have gone up. So going back by that statistics alone, clearly it's been top of the mind. It's something that people are thinking about very proactively. People are understanding that this is something that needs to be spoken about and needs to be done. So clearly that's very evident. The other thing that I'm seeing now, and then this is, again, it would not necessarily be relevant to all organizations, but some organizations probably are slightly more mature and slightly more futuristic in terms of their outlook. I think this whole conversation around career development, career management, that the seriousness around that, I see a significant increase in the you know around that, in terms of people are now, organizations, a lot of organizations are seriously thinking in terms of how do you deploy a structured career development framework within organizations, right? So people understanding that your employees are slightly now concerned in terms of the longevity of their of what skills do they carry. So it's a both from a demand side and a supply side, there is a challenge. And organizations who are mature and are able to look into the future, look into the you know into the future, they realize something needs to be done, right? And you need to invest not only from an organizational point of view, but also from an individual employee's point of view, and do some serious work around reskilling people. And I think, again, reskilling as a phrase, as a topic, has been spoken about, has been, you know, it's been spoken about for some time now. But the degree of seriousness is what I'm trying to sort of emphasize on. And the number of organizations are now seriously talking around that. That has gone through a shift in my mind. And that's great news, according to me.
Thank you, Prashant. Lena, one quick question to you is that, when you talk about this wellness program and how broad-based they can be, what is the kind of, how are the Generation Z reacting to it? Are they okay to spend their time on these, wellness activities, or they live a very fast-paced life and they're so opinionated? And the ones who don't want to do, how would you convince them to do, some kind of things like that?
So I can say, Pooja, I don't have to look far. You have to appeal very differently to different generations. I have a teenage daughter, and all I had to tell her was, if you do this, this is what will happen. And then next day, I found her actually practicing very seriously, right? So it's really about knowing what people want, right? And there's no point in putting a program together if your people don't want it. And while I don't even see this as an onus of the organization, but because organization uh, has the ability to create and provide access to you easy, I think that is where the organization steps in. Of course, do I care as a employer about the well-being of my talent? Of course I do. But at the end of the day, the individual has to walk that path. And you can appeal to different individuals differently, and for that you just have to figure out what works for them. So if one program doesn't work for them, something else will. And if nothing works for them, that's okay also, right? It depends on what they want. For example, I came across a product where you're getting some coaching around sleeping, right? Very recently, that sleep patterns. Now maybe that's something that will appeal to people. It's a new thing, it's not even been launched, but we are talking to them to figure out how it can be accessed by a certain section of our organization. So you have to constantly think about ways, and you have to create programs that appeal to people, and it's best to co-create it with them. If uh, you can't be sitting on a pedestal, and I think that's the mistake that we've been making all these years, that all the policies, practices, thoughts have, as Prashant said, come from the intelligent layer, but at the end of the day it has to be bottom informed too. So involve the bottom a bit into the design, and you will find the right design, and it will not be universally liked. Let's accept that fact. Whatever we do will never be universally applicable. That one size fits all approach, long gone and done, right? And customize to the extent you can, and beyond that, of course, it is individual's choice. Pooja, that's what I would say.
Sure.
And Pooja, just to build on this, I think there are certain fundamentals which have not changed, and certain principles. This whole concept of WIFM, what's in it for me. So you spoke about what will appeal to communities. I mean, that's what you need to understand. What's in it for them. If you understand that, and that fundamental, pandemic, no pandemic, I mean, this is the science of human behavior. That is not going to change unless we rewire ourselves. Something happens, and we get rewired completely differently. That fundamental doesn't change, right? So the programs may change, but if it doesn't address the WIFM of your target audience, it's not going to work.
Definitely. So I'll take one audience question, and the person wants to know, how do you assess an organization's readiness to change? Prashant, you'll take that.
Wow. So I mean, sitting outside, it's very difficult to assess that. You need to get into the pulse of the organization and to figure out in terms of and that's where you'll need to hear not a certain section of the people, but the entire organizational hierarchy, so to say. And once you understand the survey that we are talking about, if you run that within an organization, that will clearly tell you in terms of how ready, if you trigger certain change, how the organization is going to respond to that. That will give you, I wouldn't say it will give you a fairly good indication in terms of how the organization is going to respond to that change. I mean, how much they will fight it, how much will they be receptive to it. It will give you a good sense. And I think you really need to get and understand in terms of, how, I mean, there are, again, I don't want to get technical. There are enough psychometric tools to, administer leadership, and there are a lot of, scales that will get thrown at you, and they're all good tools. I'm not discounting either of them, but it's the pulse. It's the pulse that you really need to check, and you have to, sort of get into the organization, listen to a cross section of the organization, a microcosm of the organization, as we call it. Right, you need to listen to and understand the microcosm, the voice of the microcosm, and that gives a fairly good sense about the readiness to change.
Thank
If
you.
I can just add to Prashant's point, I think what is the need for change is equally important. Is it understood? Is it enforced? If people understand why the organization is needing to change, not just at a cognitive, at intellectual level, but also a bit on emotional level, the readiness to change is much higher. So, it's I was taught very early on in my career that the quality of the change is the change magnitude is equal to the quality of the solution as well as the acceptance of the solution. Acceptance can only be there if people understand the need to change. So if you have sowed the right seeds, and if you are emphasizing the reason why one should change, and it is well understood by the organization, automatically you'll find more people aligning to the change and not do that. So I would just want to add that point to what Prashant said.
Sure. So the another question is that a person who aspires to become a leader of tomorrow, what are some of the skills that person must work on? Essential skills to be a future leader. Nina, you'll take that.
See, it's ever evolving. If I could answer that, I would be writing a book and minting money on that. It's ever evolving. And look at today. Look at what has happened in the past. We are speaking the same words, but the meanings have changed over a period of time. So I think the biggest 2-3 points that Prashant had talked about in my mind are very critical. Being resilient is very critical. Being agile, which means having the mindset to shift directions, is again very critical. Adaptiveness is very critical. I think if you have these 3 good ingredients with you, you are home. But like I said, if I had the crystal ball to gaze and I could tell you everything, then I would be writing a book about it. Yeah. So Prashant, anything you want to add to that?
Yeah, I think, and the only thing that I would add is, what intellectual. I mean, people intellectual, don't confuse it with how much knowledge you have. Intellectual curiosity is more critical than being intellectual, because your intellectuality is in that context, and it is only that intellectuality is for that particular period of time. That knowledge will have its own life. But if we are intellectually curious, you will ensure that you are relevant forever. Right. So that is something that I feel today's, you just need to be hungry for, you just need to be a sponge to absorb and, and process that information on a continual basis. Right. It's extremely important, I think, in today's day and age.
And, I would also add one more, which is reflection. I was in fact thinking as you spoke, Prashant, reflection will give you the insight for tomorrow.
Absolutely.
If you're not reflecting today and you're not understanding the signs, it's said no looking around the corner. I think it's a very critical skill. Who would have thought last year, even the best of leaders, that this will hit us? So looking around the corner in that situation is very important as well. So it's about absorbing, about, being a sponge, processing it, and
Yeah.
also reflecting to see how to move forward.
Yeah.
So another question that has come in is, suggestions on rewards and recognition strategies for remote working teams. Leena?
A simple thank you is good enough. A pat in the back, which is done nicely on time, is the best thing you can do. No amount, and we don't say that enough. Trust me,
We
we
don't.
don't. I don't too. Okay. And I keep reminding myself that I have to keep, it's just telling the team. And, I feel the best strategy of any R&R is to catch people doing right things. Unfortunately, all these years of, look at development feedback, look at, what the person hasn't done well. We are so focused on what the person hasn't done well.
And
Even as
appreciate
a
in the moment.
Yes. So, catch people doing right things, tell them that time. And I think you are home. You have the
Yeah.
best reward strategy ever.
Again, picking up on what Leena said, Pooja, I think there are certain fundamentals which have not changed. And you remember when you were kids, we, along with our parents, we were taken to some relative, chacha, nana, and then, when you are young and we are just started going to school, and the parents will put us up in front of our, that entire, in the family gathering and say, Beta, Humpty Dumpty Sunao, right? And then we stand there and recite that, poem. And just imagine if after that we have done our entire bit, and for whatever reasons, the elders are not, clapping for us, how bad do we feel as a kid? How how disturbed we feel. My two bit on this is that we have grown, but that little need for appreciation has not changed. We still enjoy that moment. People may accept it, people may not. A lot of people say mujhe to farak nahi padta hai, I don't care, but trust me, the degree may have changed, but everybody enjoys and looks for that little pat on the back and that appreciation. We have not changed. We are still that kid even today. And if managers, if organizations realize that and respect that, I think we have done ourselves a big favor. Forget the individual.
So, Leena, how much can the digital close that gap? Can we have the bots, thanking employees every time they submit a assignment? Is that good enough?
2 days
These are
later,
tactics.
everybody
These
will,
are tactics.
yeah, see, 2 days later, everybody will know it's a bot. Okay. You call it whatever, people will know it's a bot. I mean, there is nothing better than a manager, or, we'll change the term when Pooja comes back with research on that. uh, when there is, you do look for that positive reinforcement. And uh, I haven't seen digital tools work. I'm a big fan of digital, please, don't get me wrong, but in this regard, a simple thank you note, well written, is can't, I think beats the toughest, the highest awards that you would have got. So it's also how you do it, right? And if I know we are out of time, but I remember this happened many years back, and I still remember that particular incident where we had put our nominations as India for a reward, or for an award, globally. And this is when I was working in GE. And I got a notice saying that, hey, we have additional questions regarding your nomination. Leena, please, can you be on a call for 15 minutes? And once it is done, then we will, take the process forward. So Shukla, who was my co-partner, and me both get on a call. We are nervous. We are preparing for, what questions might come our way. And then we enter the call and we realize the entire India leadership was there, including, including the CEO. And they said, oh, we ambushed you. We just wanted to congratulate you for winning the regional best region award. And that, there was no monetary value. I don't even know if it was. I don't even remember if there was a trophy. Nothing I remember, but I remember this.
That moment
So,
is. Yeah.
the moment is what we need to create for people in a manner that means something for them. Otherwise, you will not have a Leena repeating this to you. And
Yeah.
they did it so thoughtfully that it stayed in my mind. And it has two till date, it has been the best recognition ever for me, right? So, that's what you should think about. And, we don't have to be fancy about it at all. It just took somebody to think, what would really mm, make a difference to the people who are winning this award. And that's it.
That's why, Pooja, we call this smart HR, right? So it's not about just blindly bringing in technology everywhere. It's
Exactly.
balancing between technology and the human element, right? And that's what smart HR is all about. In the
And
entire employee life
it was
cycle.
done on technology. It was done on a technology platform. So that's where
Yeah.
technology comes in.
Yeah. Simon Sinek has made all the brain, all the secretion in the brain so famous, and this is exactly the science of HR that we need to understand and appreciate and leverage smartly.
Yeah. Any closing remarks, Prashant? We don't have much time, but maybe if you.
I think, yeah. I mean, nothing at the end of it. All I would say is that borrowing from what Lena mentioned in the opening, be authentic and be visible as leaders, as HR. I think that would be my only and the only caution over here is being visible. Don't confuse it with being that flamboyant speaker. That's not what I mean. In fact, don't confuse it with that. In fact, so many times it's not about your flamboyance. It's not about being that slick, smart speaker. It's not about that. Being authentic, being visible is about something else, and that's what we need to appreciate. So that's it. I'll close
Lina,
with that.
anything you would like to, any closing remark?
Totally agree with Prashant. I don't think there is much to add beyond that. And I would say that, listen, and I have said this in many, many places. It is so important to keep listening. And then, you'll not lose your way. If everybody thinks that way, that, uh, we will be informed by what we are pulsing, I think we are sorted. If I think I know all the answers, I'm in trouble.
Yeah. So with this, we come to the close of this session. We've had quite a few hard-hitting questions. We don't have answers for all these questions. Definitely the crisis has initiated a change, but I think we have a long, long way to go before we can truly start fostering a culture of creativity and innovation. But the start has been made. Thank you, Lena. Thank you, Prashant.